Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special Children's Week chat. I'm Bruce Leslie, president of First Focus on Children. Today, we're happy to celebrate our third annual Children's Week, a week where advocates across the country amplify the issues most important to our nation's children and call on our country's lawmakers to act in the best interest of the child. To start this week, we are very happy to welcome Representative Susan Wild from Pennsylvania's 7th Congressional District. Congresswoman Wild, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Congresswoman, you recently introduced a very important bill for kids. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation with Pennsylvania Representative Brian Fitzpatrick that would protect full funding of for the Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP. What does your bill, the CHIPper Act, do, and why is it particularly important for CHIP programs to maintain coverage in these times?
So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to speak on what I consider to be a vital issue, which of course is children's health, and specifically children's health insurance. But children's health is really what's at the heart of this bill. Without action such as the one that in this bill that Representative Fitzpatrick and I have co-led, federal cuts to the CHIP program would take effect October 1st of this year. We don't yet know if we're going to see further spikes of COVID-19 in the fall, but we do know that people need access to care right now and that families are straining to afford healthcare as well as many other things. So what we have right now, well, let me just back up for a second and say that the whole idea of CHIP is to make sure that families who do not qualify for Medicaid, in other words, they earn too much to qualify for Medicaid, but are not able to afford marketplace insurance for their families, are able to have their children insured under CHIP. And now with people losing their jobs, being furloughed, and all of the uncertainty that is going on economically for working people everywhere, I think that having CHIP in place is more vital than ever over the next few months. So the CHIPper Act was, as I mentioned before, Representative Fitzpatrick and I co-led it. I'm very proud that it's bipartisan. CHIP is one of the most popular acts in the country, one of the most popular programs in the country, and it has very widespread bipartisan support. And so we just want to make sure that the federal supplements for CHIP are not eradicated. And that would happen if we allowed this to expire at the end of September. And so what it does essentially is that it makes sure that we have the matching funds that the federal government provides for CHIP going to the states so that they can continue to provide CHIP to their working families.
That's great. I know we had seen reports from the state of Pennsylvania that said that between the increase in the number of kids who are relying on CHIP and the scheduled potential reduction of federal money, so they would still maintain a match, but it would decline, right?
Right.
That they were worried that sometime next year they might have to impose waiting periods if your bill doesn't pass. Is that how you understand?
That's my understanding in Pennsylvania. My understanding is that the number of applicants for CHIP has risen considerably since COVID started, presumably because of working parents who have either lost their health insurance, lost their jobs during the COVID period. And so that's going to create an additional strain on the states, of course, with additional applicants. And my biggest concern is that we won't be able to keep the people who are already on CHIP on it, as well as shutting out people who need it going forward.
Congresswoman, you're one of a select few people that we do a scorecard every year where we kind of analyze all the votes, co-sponsorships, bill sponsors of members of Congress. And you were named a Defender for Children this year, an honor that we designate to leaders in Congress who, quote, repeatedly use their legislative roles to raise, lift, or move to the forefront those issues that are important for America's children. So clearly children's health is not the only issue related to children that you prioritize. What else would you like to see your colleagues in the House and Senate stand with you on with regard to children? And how can advocates support your efforts?
Well, thank you for that question. I will tell you that I'm a mother myself. My children are no longer children, although they'll always be my children. They're in their mid-20s. But, you know, I don't believe that we should ever be penalizing children for the decisions made by adults. And I'm not talking necessarily about their families. I'm talking about legislators. I'm talking about educators. So, for instance, I'm on the Education and Labor Committee. I have been a strong proponent for equal access to a good public school education across the state of Pennsylvania and across the country, regardless of what zip code a child lives in. We know that good education leads to better health outcomes. And in addition, we know that our educational system in many districts, including a couple in my district, provides nutrition for children. So we have been very involved in making sure that the school lunch program continues to be supported. And I want to see everybody support that. And the reason I started this by saying that children should not be penalized for the actions of adults, we really need to come together on both sides of the aisle as a country and think about the fact that when children are born, we make a decision that we are going to protect them, allow them to thrive, be educated, and grow up to be their best possible selves as adults. And so I want to make sure that we are focusing on their health care first and foremost. I want to make sure that we are focusing on their education and emergency education funding. I was really proud that as a result of the CARES Act, the most distressed school district in my district was able to receive $10 million in relief funding. We need to make sure that the federal earned income tax credit and child tax credit stays in existence, because it lifts 5 million children out of poverty, and they need to be protected. So, and safeguarding and expanding the Affordable Care Act needs to be a top priority, not only for our kids, but for their families. Because when parents are not able to get good health care, their children will suffer by extension. Even if the children are insured under CHIP, they need to know that their parents are healthy and able to take care of them properly. And finally, I would just encourage everybody to, when they go to vote, that they look at candidates across the board from local office all the way up and say to themselves, does this candidate support issues and policies that will benefit children? Because the children, it's, you know, nothing profound about this. Children are the future of this country.
Yeah, we're often quick to remind folks that children can't vote and don't have political action committees. So it's up to us and defenders like you to make sure kids' voices are heard. So that your message there is, like, you know, definitely something that we agree with, and we urge, you know, we have sort of a hashtag we use during the election to vote kids, and really encourage, you know, advocates and people to do exactly as you said. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, what drives you to be such a strong advocate for children, and when so many others ignore their issues? You know, kids are, we often talk about how kids are sort of seen as a afterthought. In fact, you know, there was actually some protections in the HEROES Act, you know, for Medicaid, but you know, CHIP was sort of left behind, and it's kind of, it's not that people do it. Sometimes it's not that people do it on purpose. It's just they sort of neglect or forget about the kid angle. So, you know,
let me just mention that as the HEROES Act was coming to the floor for a vote, one of the things that disappointed me the most was that this bill, the CHIPper bill, was not included in it. And I lobbied long and hard, as my legislative staff will tell you, to have it included. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think that it won't get passed before the end of September. I believe there is strong desire and interest to make sure that this gets passed. And so I am very optimistic about that. But to me, as you said it best, children can't vote and they don't have a PAC. and they need to make sure that we are watching out for them. And I think that every single person who believes that lives matter needs to think about the lives of children, and how do we make sure that as I said before, not only that they're protected, but that they are put in the best possible space so that they can not only be protected, but thrive and grow up into being successful, productive, happy, and healthy adults. I will tell you, in addition to having my own children, for a number of years, almost a decade, we participated in a wonderful organization called the Fresh Air Fund. It was originally set up by the New York Times to bring children from the inner city out to the country. I certainly don't think we live my particular house is not in the country in Pennsylvania 7, but compared to the inner cities of New York, it certainly offers a lot of green, open space, wilderness, areas to hike and see farm animals and that kind of thing. And so we, every summer, had a young man at the time, a boy, come out from the Bronx and spend the entire summer with us. And it was a wonderful experience, not only for him, but for our family. My children really learned a lot about sharing and compassion, and teaching somebody younger than them about all kinds of wonderful aspects of nature. We have to look for these kinds of programs that provide volunteer opportunities, but we can't rely solely on volunteer opportunities. It is up to us as a country to make sure that we have an infrastructure that will make sure that our children grow up healthy and safe.
Yeah, I really appreciate that message. It's definitely on. It's a combination of, we as individuals, families, communities, nonprofits, and also the government, working hand in hand to really make kids a priority. So, and you do it every day, and we so appreciate it. And I just want to thank you so much for all your work in Congress on behalf of kids, and thank you for your time today and helping us really lift up and raise attention to the issues of importance to kids. And would urge anybody who's watching this to ask their member of Congress to support your piece of legislation, HR 6797, the Children's Health Insurance Program Pandemic Enhancement and Relief Act, which the short acronym for it is the CHIPPER Act. And also thank you for continued advocacy on behalf of Pennsylvania's and America's children.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that First Focus does. It's really important to keep focus on children, and to, a lot of people, when their children grow up and leave the house, it's very easy to stop thinking about children's needs. And it's just so important that you keep redirecting all of us to do that.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We really appreciate your time again, and call us anytime if we can be of help to you.
Right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
So that does it for this week's, for this episode of Children's Week Chat. But tune in all week on our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube feeds, where we'll be speaking with other champions for children and discussing ways to make children a priority in both our budget and policy processes. Until next time, thank you.